Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my mid-July wrap-up. I read some really good books at the beginning of this month. So the first book I read this month was The Magnolia Sword by Sherry Thomas, and I had put off reading this for quite a while, basically because I knew it was going to be a big deal to me and I knew it was going to emotionally affect me a lot. And I was correct. I love Mulan. I can't fully express to you how much I love Mulan. Specific tropes that tend to be in it, in retellings of her story, include cross-dressing, obviously. Cross-dressing specifically to become a warrior is a thing that I have loved since I read the Lioness Rampant series by Tamora Pierce. I obviously have a thing for lady warriors. Battle-forged friendships, I guess is what you would call them, the type of friendships that Mulan has with her fellow army members. And these have been in the various Mulan retellings that I have seen and read. I didn't totally expect this because it's in a different format, and I kind of thought it might be overly serious or a lot more serious than the movies, which are how I first fell in love with Mulan. But this made me feel a lot of the feelings that the movies make me feel, both the original animated version and the newer live-action movie. And these vastly different movies and this book, which is different again, still gave me some of the same vibes that I'm so fond of. So, about this book specifically, it goes at it from the tack of, if Mulan is going to be such a great warrior, she probably can't start training at the same time as all of the other army recruits, because that's just a lot. You just can't learn martial arts that fast. And while talent will take you a certain way, a certain distance as far as differentiating you from other people who have trained the same amount, it's not gonna make you able to, hello Pippin, go up against somebody who's been training for years and years, such as the villains of the Mulan stories have. So in the second live-action movie of Mulan, Mulan has been training for years and years because that's her personality, that's what she likes to do. And in this book, she's been training for years and years to prepare for a duel between her family and another family over some swords, some very cool swords. And she has been chosen instead of, say, a man or one of her brothers, because her brother is a lot younger than her and she is a matching age for her opponent in this other family. And women have been warriors in this particular duel, which is an intergenerational duel before, so it's like not unheard of and not that weird. But once again, women are very much not allowed in the army. So when the draft comes down, as it does in Mulan, she decides to go to war not only for the sake of her father, who is paralyzed, but also for her little brother, who's like 11, and her cousin, who is described in that way that fantasy books have of doing. That means he's either autistic or has Down syndrome. A lot of just people in general, but specifically historical books where they didn't know anything, tend to conflate those two developmental disabilities. And that character was very much not in very much of the book, so I didn't have to worry about the author butchering that representation. What there was of it was fine, as far as I'm concerned. But she fortunately has an advantage going off to war because she has been trained not only in fighting specifically, martial arts, with swords, and also with hidden weapons is what they're called, and I assume that's like a historical term of what they would be called, which is not just throwing stars, which is something that Western people are fairly familiar with the idea of, but also like little heavy balls that you like throw to like disable people. Really cool. And they're just, you know, little tiny things you can hide on yourself, called hidden, so they're called hidden weapons, but they're specifically meant to be thrown. And also she's been trained in tactics. And so she has an advantage over the other new recruits when she first goes off, but there's not a lot that those types of skills are going to do for her in formation fighting or in army fighting in general. I'm not sure if they used formation fighting in this era. The biggest examples of formation fighting are what the Romans used. But in either case, when you're around a ton of other people who are your allies, there's only a couple of very basic skills that are going to be useful to you. Her type of skills are more useful when you're separated out and there are more bad guys than good guys, and so you'll have like room to move and room to make your own decisions and not have to do what everyone around you is doing. That's kind of explained much better in the book. So she is worried about getting killed when she's just being ordered around by generals who could make mistakes and kill her with her abilities not being able to do anything about it. So when she gets the chance to apply to be part of a princelings, which is like and part of the nobility, son of a duke, personal entourage, she takes it and is very impressive. Catches an arrow, which, if you've seen Mythbusters, is technically possible, but not the way that she does it specifically. And even super duper martial artists can only do it like 1 out of 3 or 5 arrows, because it's just really freaking fast, even if you're at the end of the arrow's range, which this actually talks about her being careful to make sure she is at the end of the arrow's range, and how it's way easier for her to catch a thing when it's not aimed at her. So I liked most of what was going on in that scene. It was just a little bit of martial artist superpowers, which is a kind of a part of the sort of subgenre that this is in, of slight fantasy, where it mixes with martial arts. So that's where we meet a bunch of very interesting people, and we get in a much smaller group. And while the characters in this much smaller group are not named after or personality wise based off of the characters from the movies, they gave me those feelings, these are my ridiculous friends who I would totally trust to have my back in a fight feelings. And I didn't really expect that, and it was really, really nice. Personally, I would have liked more fight scenes, but I don't think those are this author's specialty, because when she did write them in, they were passable, but not like super amazing Tamora Pierce level stuff. So like, I understand the not over excessiveness of fight scenes. There are a lot of sneaking around, being spies, and figuring out the bad guy's plot, figuring out big strategies to save the country scenes, and those are really cool. Also a lot of relationship scenes and deciding who to trust stuff, and the romance is adorable. I had an absolutely excellent time, and I laughed out loud several times while reading this, and it was just such a good time. So I'm so glad I finally read this, but I am also kind of glad that I waited to be in the right mood to read it so that I can enjoy it fully. I wouldn't have to like distance myself from the emotions, because sometimes when I'm already a bit of a mess, if I read a book that makes me emotional, I have to like pull myself out of it. So I'm really, really happy with this book. I'm so happy to own it. Then we have another issue of Lumberjanes. This was the first one. It finally came from the library, and so indeed it did have more characterization of this character in the middle here. Turns out she's a math nerd, and we went through a cave that had a bunch of puzzles, so like all of the characters got to show off their specific skills in this or that type of puzzle, which is a very fun fantasy adventure trope that I enjoy. It definitely leans into ridiculousness, but with just the right sense of humor for me, one that fits with my sense of humor, that I find it really entertaining. And I am really liking all the characters now, and I'm excited to find out more about this wacky magical world forest that they are camping in. Then I read Soul Lanterns, which I'm pretty sure Kara talked about, and I actually got this from the library really quickly after hearing about it, and then was like, I want to read that now, and so I read it in a day. It's not very long. Yeah, 158 pages of fairly large print. So, quite short. It is about this girl and a few of her friends who want to make a special art exhibition for, I believe, the anniversary of Hiroshima being bombed. The 25th, I believe, so this is in about 1970. And so they go around asking people that they know who lived fairly close to the city, or who had relatives or friends who went into the city on that day, and ask about what they experienced, the loss of their loved ones, the people who tried to help each other, so like the hospitals and orphanages and things like that. And it was very emotional. That part of the culture, that part of history is more interwoven into American culture than we think it does. I think reading and sharing this book is just one small way of bringing a different perspective from what is commonly taught in American schools. Americans who don't think about it too much, or who think it was a really good thing, or who consign it to the past when the effects are still very much a thing today. Even though this book was set in 1970, still very much gives the impression that the past is not just the past, it affects the present. And I think that's a very valuable thing to think about. Okay, big mood change, because none of these other books are that sad. Shadow of Kyoshi. This is an awesome book, as well. Harkening back to Magnolia Sword, I also put this off because I was worried about the emotions it was going to give me, and I had heard that this might be even more emotional than the previous Rise of Kyoshi, and it was, but not in a bad way. I love Avatar: The Last Airbender so much, and I loved Rise of Kyoshi so much. Ow. 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 What the... Sorry, just had a sharp pain above my heart. I love when that happens. I promise I'm not having a heart attack. That happens on both sides of my chest, and it's just my muscles cramping. Anyway, so this skips some time in between the last book and this book, and I really appreciate that, because it skipped a non-enjoyable time and right to a really enjoyable time, in my opinion, because it gets us back with Rengi, this character who I adore. First of all, she's kind of got a bodyguard sort of thing going on with Kyoshi, and y'all know that I really like bodyguard ex-guard-y romances. They are so cute together. Kyoshi is a giant, if you've watched the show or read the previous book. How big is she? I think she's 7 foot tall, at least. She's got big feet, she's got big muscles, she's the earthbender. And Rengi is, you know, normal firebender size. Probably about the size of Azula, or May. And so it's this great big girlfriend with her little girlfriend, and it's so cute. And Rengi is also her, what's it called? Sensei? Or Shifu? She teaches her firebending. She's her firebending master. And so they have a authority over each other in different ways, dynamic, as well as being childhood friends, and I love it so much. And this introduces some more characters and reintroduces older characters. We get to see adults actually taking responsibility for how bad they were and mistakes they made in their life, which is also really enjoyable for me. We see Kyoshi continuing to deal with the trauma that happened in the previous book, figuring out what kind of avatar she's going to be. And we know from the show that she's a badass avatar who kills people if that's what it takes, as opposed to, say, Aang, who does not, at least not on purpose. He throws people off of cliffs and then we pretend that they didn't die, I guess. But, you know, killing a singular villain in cold blood, I guess, sort of cold blood. Once you have him immobilized, even after he's been trying to kill you, does it still count as cold blood? Anyway, that's not allowed. But we see that she didn't always necessarily feel comfortable being that kind of avatar, and she's trying to figure out how to not be like her mentor who abused her and who did a lot of evil things, but also how to fight evil with not evil, basically. And she's a very powerful avatar, as avatars tend to be, a lot of bending power, and how do you use that for good without becoming a bit of a despot? And also, how do you handle multiple world problems going on at the same time? And I liked her relationships with the various different teammates she got together with throughout the story. So yeah, it's an amazing book. It's a wonderful follow-up, and I felt very satisfied when it was over. I think I might need to buy this because I'm definitely going to want to reread it. Okay, then we had another amazing book, which is Act Your Age, Eve Brown. People have had various responses to this series of which one they like the best. I like this one the best, personally. It was definitely different from the others, and different from a lot of like traditional romance stories in that the placement of the sex scenes, I guess, in the distribution of the book, it usually happens a lot sooner than it happened in this book. And the traditional 3/4 breakup thing happened differently than in a lot of books, and I like that. I like changing it up and not being able to totally predict everything, and I like it to be organic to each couple, which is obviously going to be different all the time. I hadn't heard this before, so I don't know if people consider it a spoiler. Just so y'all know, someone's neurodivergence, or lack thereof, is not a spoiler any more than someone's sexual orientation or gender is a spoiler. Both characters in here are autistic. The main lady character just doesn't figure it out till partway through the book. But all along there are definitely, when we were in Eve's perspective, she was thinking thoughts, and I was like, that's a very autistic thing to think. I really like this because it's two autistic characters. It's like double representation, and they're, you know, different from each other because every autistic person is different. I just love being in the brain of another autistic person. It's relaxing, and it's pleasant, and it's relatable, and obviously much like Kiss Quotient and Helen Huang's whole series, as well as several other books by Talia Hibbert, who is autistic, makes me feel a lot more lovable when I read romances that include autistic people. This is a mutual irritants to lovers situation. I wouldn't call them enemies, but it's just they both find each other irritating and are kind of forced through circumstances, and Eve feeling guilty that she hit the hero with her car to spend time together while she kind of takes over his job for him at a B&B, helps with his B&B while he's injured because of her, and he has to accept this help because he doesn't have any other employees and doesn't really have the money to go get more employees, and it's just really cute. The hero actually gives off a lot of Darcy vibes, where he's blunt to the point of rudeness, or doesn't care what people think to the point of rudeness, or just has misunderstandings and is awkward and shy to the point of rudeness. And I really enjoy that archetype as well. Talia Hibbert's sex scenes are fairly reliably not for me, but I don't care because I like the characters and the story. This is probably the coziest of the Brown sisters trilogy, in my opinion, because it's set in a B&B. I love B&Bs, especially British ones. Then we have the book I finished yesterday for part of the mid-grade magic readathon, which I will try to remember to link below. The Dragon Warrior, which I said I was going to read for this readathon, and then I actually did it. I'm so proud of myself. This is by Katie Zhao. Cover read, kind of, and also title, you know, very much my thing. And this is a middle grade about a girl and a boy, siblings, so it's one of those fairly classic brother-sister middle grade duos, who have been raised in the Jade Society, which is a Chinese society that was started and maintained to fight demons who come out of the woodwork at occasions, especially during the Lunar New Year, but other times as well, and like try to eat people and set things on fire. And so they train as warriors to be able to fight, and they have a few magical weapons and a fair number of regular weapons. And lately the demons have been quiet, so the society has gone on sabbatical, kind of. They have decided to stop training seriously and just be ceremonial, because they think that if they ease back and don't like act like they're threatening to the demons, that the demons won't come again. But then demons start popping up, and our main characters are some of the few who have been training to do actual combat because their grandfather is very dedicated to it. And then the gods, of which there are about 8 big ones, specifically the Jade Emperor, he's going to pick a warrior to fight a new bigger battle against the demons because they're coming, which is obviously going to be our main character. But to prove herself, she has to set out on a quest to solve a riddle, traveling around, solving some problems. And I really liked like the magic system in this, where prayers kind of allow the gods to take part. Like, it kind of struggles with the whole Deus Ex Machina thing, because it is literally God saving the day a bunch. And like, there's a question of why didn't the gods just do it in the first place? Why are they using this human person? And then that's never totally answered, but it can kind of be thought that maybe the gods can't do anything until a prayer is said. And I kind of like that interaction of the person prays and something actually happens, because religious ways of interacting with magic tend to be downplayed a lot in a lot of fantasy. So I kind of like that different way of doing things. There's a very weird moment in this where someone was racist to the main character because she's mixed blood. She's Chinese, but also Turkish, Greek, and maybe Egyptian. And somebody just does a microaggression of saying, didn't think people like you would be here. And then she like kind of calls him on it, and then he's like, oh, it's okay, I didn't mean it in a bad way, I'm non-binary. Which is just a really weird, maybe those were meant to be 2 separate thoughts, but it felt like he was saying, I can't be racist, I'm non-binary, which is not how that works. I don't know, it felt like really dropped in there awkwardly, queer rep. So yeah, that was a weird, that was a really weird moment, but other than that, I really like this book. There were also a couple of other weird moments where like physically impossible things would happen, or physically awkward. Like, multiple times these characters are in a chariot, a flying chariot, with horses pulling the chariot, and they sit down in the chariot and then they hug the horses while they're still in the chariot. Which, if you picture in your mind, are you just hugging their butt? Is that what you're doing? Or did you crawl out of the chariot and then put your arms around them? Or what is happening? The fight scenes were not the best, and if you tried to imagine them in too much accurate detail to what was being said in the book, it didn't make much sense. But if you just kind of go with the flow, it's fine. It's more about plot and character than actually the details of physically where people are and what they're doing with their weapons. It ended in a very unsatisfying place, so now I have to read the next book. Yeah, it doesn't say what time it's supposed to be coming out, but I thought I pre-ordered it and that it was coming out in like September or something. But my favorite aspect was definitely the mythology and like the magical creatures we got to interact with, and like the rules of the magical creatures and the different personalities and powers of the gods. But if you like the Percy Jackson Presents series, this had a lot of similarities to several of those, as far as like plot points of going on a journey and visiting various mythological enemies and allies along the way. If you like that, you'll probably like this book, and I'm looking forward to the next one. let's have a dragon for our emoji today if you feel like it, and I'd love to know what you've been reading lately, and if you read any of these, what are your thoughts? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!